In the glittering halls of Budapest's Hotel Duna, a priceless 17th-century clock, the Chronos jewel, hides a deadly secret. When a brilliant horologist is found stabbed, the clock's face shattered, Miss Jane Marple, an unassuming English spinster, steps into a web of greed and revenge. As a second murder strikes, clues, red wax, a pearl earring, a hidden key, point to a killer among the elegant guests. With time ticking, can Miss Marple unwind the truth before the next deadly chime? Welcome to a mystery where every second counts. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Limewood. In the quiet village of Limewood, where the hedgerows bloomed with late autumn hawthorn, and the church spire cast a gentle shadow over thatched roofs, Miss Jane Marple sat in her neat parlour at Rose Cottage. The fire crackled softly, its warmth a counterpoint to the crisp October air seeping through the window panes. Her nimble fingers worked a pair of knitting needles, coaxing soft blue wool into the beginnings of a shawl for her nephew, Raymond's youngest. Yet her eyes, bright and bird-like behind her spectacles, were not on the wool, but on the world beyond, though today that world seemed confined to the predictable rhythms of Limewood. The village was much like any other in England. A post office where gossip flowed as freely as tea, a vicarage prone to minor scandals, and a high street where the butcher and baker vied for custom with cheerful rivalry. Miss Marple, however, found in Limewood's ordinariness a microcosm of human nature, where small gestures, a glance, a hesitation, revealed truths as profound as any found in London, or, indeed, Budapest. It was just past 3 when the postman, young Tom Bates, arrived with a single letter, its envelope thick and crim-coloured, bearing a Hungarian postmark. Miss Marple opened it with her silver letter-knife, her curiosity piqued. The handwriting was unmistakably that of Lady Beatrice Hargrove, a friend from her school days at the Florence Academy for Young Ladies, though their paths had diverged since Beatrice's marriage to a diplomat. The letter was an invitation, penned with Beatrice's characteristic elegance, but tinged with an undercurrent of unease. "My dear Jane," it began, "I find myself in Budapest, where my nephew, Sir Rowland Hargrove, is hosting an exhibition of rare antique clocks at the Hotel Duna. It is a grand affair, but I confess the company is not entirely harmonious. Rowland is distracted, and there are whispers of secrets among the guests. Your presence would be a balm to my nerves, and I suspect a clarity to our troubles. Do come, if you can." Miss Marple folded the letter, her mind already turning over its implications. Budapest was a world away from Limewood's sleepy lanes, yet human nature, she knew, was the same whether under a village oak or a city's gilded chandelier. She recalled Rowland Hargrove, a boyish figure from years past, now a baronet with a passion for horology. Beatrice's mention of secrets was telling. In Miss Marple's experience, such whispers often preceded calamity. By the next evening, after a journey marked by the clatter of trains and the bustle of foreign stations, Miss Marple arrived at the Hotel Duna. The hotel stood on the banks of the Danube, its facade a blend of Baroque grandeur and modern opulence, with tall windows reflecting the river's silver ripples. A porter ushered her into the lobby, where crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over marble floors and velvet drapes. Beatrice awaited her, her silver hair impeccably coiled, her smile warm but strained. "Jane, you are a marvel to come so far." Beatrice clasped her hands, her emerald brooch glinting. "I feared you'd find Budapest too daunting. "Nonsense, Beatrice," Miss Marple replied, her voice soft but firm. "A change of scene sharpens the eye, don't you think?" Her gaze, mild yet piercing, swept the lobby, noting a porter's furtive glance and a maid's hurried step. Beatrice led her to the dining room, where the other guests were already seated for a late supper. The table was set with fine porcelain, and the air carried the scent of paprika and roasted pheasant. Sir Rowland Hargrove rose to greet her, his handsome face lined with fatigue, despite his tailored evening suit. "Miss Marple, an honour," he said, though his eyes darted to the clock on the mantel, as if time itself were a guest he mistrusted. The others were introduced. Clara Varga, a Hungarian heiress with dark curls and a defiant tilt to her chin, her scarlet dress a bold contrast to the room's muted tones. Dr. Emil Kovacs, a lean horologist with a scholar's stoop and eyes that seemed to guard a private sorrow. Mr. Frederick Langley, an Englishman whose loud laugh and florid cheeks suggested a man accustomed to commanding attention, and Madame Elise Dubois, a French widow whose poised elegance belied the sharpness in her appraising glance. As the meal progressed, Miss Marple sipped her consommé, her attention less on the food than on the undercurrents at the table. Clara's barbed remark about Roland's obsession with old clocks drew her flush to his cheeks. Langley's booming jest about time being money fell flat, met by Kovacs's silent frown. Madame Dubois, cutting her pheasant with surgical precision, observed all with a faint, enigmatic smile. Beatrice, beside Miss Marple, murmured, "They're an odd lot, Jane. Roland's been on edge since he acquired that wretched clock." The clock in question, Miss Marple learned, was the Kronos jewel, a 17th century masterpiece to be unveiled at tomorrow's exhibition. Roland, rising with a glass of Tokay, announced its significance. "It's said to hold a hidden mechanism," he said, his voice tinged with pride. "Tomorrow we shall see if its secrets yield." The guests clapped politely, but Miss Marple noted Clara's tightened lips and Kovacs's clenched, fist. As the party dispersed, Miss Marple lingered, her knitting bag in hand. The dining room's clock ticked steadily, its rhythm a reminder of order in a world of disquiet. People, she thought, are like clocks, polished on the outside, but their true workings lie hidden. She retired to her room, her mind already winding through the possibilities of Beatrice's troubles. Tomorrow, she sensed, would bring more than the ticking of clocks. Chapter 2. The Shattered Kronos. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Hotel Duna's exhibition room, casting a lattice of light across polished mahogany tables and glass display cases. The air was heavy with the scent of wax polish and the faint metallic tang of old mechanisms. Miss Jane Marple, seated unobtrusively in a high-backed chair near a velvet curtain, adjusted her spectacles and observed the gathering with the quiet intensity of a naturalist studying a rare species. The room, adorned with tapestries depicting Hungary's storied past, hummed with anticipation as Sir Rowland Hargrove prepared to unveil his prized Kronos jewel, the centerpiece of his antique clock exhibition. The guests from last night's dinner were present, their faces a study in contrasts. Sir Rowland, in a charcoal suit that did little to mask his nervous energy, fussed over a velvet-draped pedestal at the room's centre. Clara Varga, her dark curls pinned loosely, paced near a display of 18th-century pocket watches, her emerald earrings catching the light with each restless turn. Dr. Emil Kovacs, his thin frame hunched over a notebook, scribbled furiously, his brow furrowed as if wrestling with an unspoken thought. Mr. Frederick Langley, red-faced and expansive, leaned against a case of ormolu clocks, his voice carrying as he regaled a bored-looking waiter with tales of his business ventures. Madame Elise Dubois, serene in a dove-grey dress, stood apart, her gloved hands clasped, her eyes flicking from guest to guest with the precision of a metronome. Lady Beatrice Hargrove, seated beside Miss Marple, whispered, "Roland's been up since dawn, fretting over that clock. It's his triumph, yet he seems almost afraid of it." Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her knitting a pale blue shawl that seemed an extension of her calm demeanour. "Fear, Beatrice," she murmured, "often ticks in time with secrets." The exhibition room was a marvel, its walls lined with clocks of every era. A German weight-driven clock with a solemn tick, a French mantel clock adorned with cherubs, a Dutch bracket clock whose chimes sang like a distant carillon. But all eyes were drawn to the Kronos jewel, still hidden beneath its velvet shroud. Sir Roland cleared his throat, his voice trembling with excitement as he addressed the small crowd of guests, hotel staff, and a few local antiquarians. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "the Kronos jewel is a masterpiece of 17th century craftsmanship said to have graced the court of Emperor Leopold I. Its maker, a shadowy figure known only as Meister Albrecht, crafted a mechanism rumoured to conceal a compartment, a secret lost to time." His hands, unsteady, reached for the velvet cloth. "Today we shall see it in all its glory." Before he could pull the cloth away, a piercing scream shattered the room's expectant hush. Clara Varga, her face ashen, pointed at the pedestal. The velvet had slipped, revealing the Kronos jewel, or what remained of it. Its ornate glass face was a spiderweb of cracks, the gold hands bent grotesquely. At the pedestal's base lay Dr. Emil Kovacs, his notebook sprawled beside him, a silver letter opener buried in his chest. Blood pooled on the parquet floor, stark against the polished wood. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs, but Miss Marple's eyes remained steady, noting the scene as if it were a tableau in a village pageant. Sir Roland staggered back, his face strained of colour. "Emile!" he cried, but made no move to approach. Clara clutched her throat, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Langley swore under his breath, his bluster replaced by a wary glance toward the exits. Madame Dubois, alone among them, stood motionless, her expression unreadable save for a faint tightening of her lips. The hotel staff, frozen in shock, awaited direction as a young maid stifled a sob. Within minutes the Hungarian police arrived, led by Inspector Lajos Nagy, a man whose sharp features and deliberate movements suggested a mind as precise as the clocks around him. His dark eyes swept the room, lingering on the shattered Kronos jewel before settling on the body. "Nobody leaves," he declared in accented English, his voice cutting through the chaos. "This is murder." As officers cordoned off the room, Miss Marple remained in her chair, her knitting untouched. She observed the guests' reactions, Roland's trembling hands as he answered Nagy's questions, Clara's tearful insistence that she had seen nothing, Langley's loud protests of innocence, and Madame Dubois' cool detachment as she offered a handkerchief to the shaken maid. Inspector Nagy, noting the letter opener's monogram, R.H., turned to Roland. "This is yours, Sir Hargrove." Roland nodded, his voice barely audible. "It was on my desk. Anyone could have taken it." Miss Marple's gaze returned to the Kronos jewel. Its mechanism, despite the broken face, emitted a faint, persistent tick, as if defiant of the violence around it. She noted a small irregularity, a glint of metal beneath the pedestal, half hidden by the velvet cloth. It was a tiny key, no larger than a thimble, its head engraved with a floral motif. She made no move to retrieve it, aware of Nagi's watchful presence, but filed the detail away, her mind already turning over its significance. As the police began their interviews, Miss Marple joined Beatrice for tea in the hotel's conservatory, a glass-walled haven filled with ferns and the murmur of a fountain. Beatrice, her hands twisting a lace napkin, said, "Jane, this is dreadful." Emile was quiet, but he knew clocks like no one else. Why would anyone do this? Miss Marple sipped her tea, her eyes distant. A clock, Beatrice, is a curious thing. It measures time, yet it can hide it too. Someone wanted Dr. Kovac's time to stop, and perhaps the Kronos jewels as well. She paused, recalling Clara's scream, so immediate, so theatrical. Had it been shock or something else? And why destroy the clock's face, unless to conceal a flaw or a secret? The conservatory's glass walls reflected the guests' silhouettes as they passed, each carrying their own burden of suspicion. Miss Marple thought of Limewood, where a broken window at the vicarage had once revealed a theft. Not because of the glass, but because of the smudge on the sill. Here, in Budapest, the shattered Kronos was a similar clue, its fragments whispering of motives yet to be uncovered. As Beatrice spoke of Roland's financial troubles, debts incurred to secure the Kronos jewel, Miss Marple's thoughts drifted to the key she had seen. It was too small for a door, too delicate for a chest. A clock, perhaps? She resolved to examine the Kronos jewel more closely, if Inspector Nagy's vigilance allowed. For now, she listened, her gentle smile masking the relentless ticking of her mind, as precise and unyielding as the mechanisms that surrounded them. Chapter 3. The Ticking Alibis. The library of the Hotel Duna, with its oak-panelled walls and shelves laden with leather-bound volumes, was a sanctuary of quietude, save for the relentless ticking of a tall grandfather clock in the corner. Its pendulum swung with a solemn rhythm, as if measuring the weight of the secrets now gathering in the room. Miss Jane Marple sat near a bay window, her knitting needles moving with the precision of a metronome, her pale blue shawl growing stitch by stitch. The morning's tragedy, the murder of Dr. Emil Kovac, and the shattering of the Kronos jewel had cast a pall over the hotel, and Inspector Lajos Nagy had commandeered the library to question the guests. Miss Marple, invited by Lady Beatrice Hargrove to observe, was content to remain in the background, her presence as unremarkable as a shadow, her mind as sharp as the letter opener that had ended Kovac's life. Inspector Nagy stood by a marble fireplace, his dark suit immaculate, his expression one of controlled impatience. His assistant, a wiry young officer named Sabot, took notes with a pencil that scratched faintly against paper. The guests, Sir Roland Hargrove, Clara Varga, Mr. Frederick Langley, and Madame Elise Dubois, sat in a semicircle of upholstered chairs, their faces a gallery of unease. The air was thick with the scent of old books and the faint bitterness of cooling coffee, served by a trembling maid who avoided looking at the guests. Nagy began with Sir Roland, whose pallor had deepened since the morning. "Sir Hargrove," the inspector said, his voice clipped, "you claim you were in your suite, preparing your speech, when Dr. Kovac was killed. Can anyone confirm this?" Roland's fingers twisted a cufflink, its silver glinting like the key Miss Marple had glimpsed earlier. "No," he admitted. "I was alone, revising my notes. I heard nothing until Clara's scream." His eyes flicked to Clara, who sat rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Miss Marple noted the hesitation in Roland's voice, like a clock skipping a beat. She recalled his distracted demeanor at dinner, his obsession with the Kronos jewel. Had he been guarding its secret or fearing its exposure? Her needles clicked softly, a counterpoint to the grandfather clock's steady rhythm. Clara Varga was next, her voice sharp with indignation. "I was in the hotel garden sketching the fountain," she said, producing a small sketchbook with a pencil sketch of water and stone. "I often draw to clear my mind. I saw no one until I returned for the exhibition." Nagy examined the sketch, his brow furrowing. "This is dated today, but it proves little," he said. Clara's cheeks flushed, but she held his gaze. Miss Marple observed the sketchbook's pristine pages, wondering if Clara's artistic alibi was as fresh as it appeared. Mr. Langley, his usual bluster subdued, claimed he was at the hotel bar, sipping a whiskey. "Ask the barman, Peter," he said, his voice loud but unsteady. "He served me himself." Nagy dispatched Sabo to verify this, and the young officer returned with a nod, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. "Peter confirms Mr. Langley was there," Sabo reported, "but he cannot recall the exact time." Langley's shoulders relaxed, but Miss Marple noted his clenched jaw, as if he were holding back more than relief. Madame Dubois, her composure as polished as the library's woodwork, spoke last. "I was in my suite, writing letters to Paris," she said, her French accent lending her words a melodic quality. "I had no reason to be in the exhibition room until the event began." Nagy pressed her, but she offered no witnesses, only a serene smile. Miss Marple's eyes lingered on Madame Dubois' gloves, pristine white silk, and wondered if they concealed more than delicate hands. As the interviews concluded, Nagy dismissed the guests but asked them to remain in the hotel. Miss Marple lingered, her knitting bag at her side, as Beatrice joined her by the window. "Jane, it's all so bewildering," Beatrice whispered. "Each of them seems plausible, yet I feel they're hiding something." Miss Marple nodded, her gaze drifting to the grandfather clock. "Alibis, my dear, are like clock faces, polished to show one thing, but the truth lies in the gears behind." Later, Miss Marple persuaded Beatrice to accompany her to the exhibition room, now guarded by a stern-faced officer. With Nagy's reluctant permission, "An old lady's curiosity," she said with a disarming smile. She examined the crime scene. The Kronos jewel remained on its pedestal, its shattered face a silent accusation. The bloodstain had been cleaned, but the letter opener, now in police custody, lingered in her mind. She knelt, her joints protesting, and studied the floor. There, near the pedestal's base, was a faint scratch, barely visible, as if something heavy had been dragged. Nearby, the tiny key she had noticed earlier was gone, likely collected by Nagy's men. She made a mental note to inquire about it. As she rose, her eyes caught a glint in the folds of the velvet cloth. A single pearl earring, its luster dulled by dust. It was too fine for a maid, too simple for Clara's flamboyant taste. Could it belong to Madame Dubois? Miss Marple tucked the thought away, like a stitch held for later. That afternoon, over tea in the hotel's rose garden, Clara approached Miss Marple, her eyes red-rimmed. "I know they suspect Roland," she said, her voice low. "But Emil was trouble. He kept asking about the Kronos jewel's history, as if he doubted its authenticity." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her expression mild. "Doubts, my dear, can be dangerous, but so can certainty." As Clara left, Miss Marple reflected on Limewood, where a villager's alibi had unravelled because of a muddy boot left by a garden gate. Here, the alibis ticked like clocks, each plausible yet fragile. Roland's solitude, Clara's sketch, Langley's whiskey, Dubois' letters, each was a cog in a larger mechanism. The pearl earring, the scratch on the floor, the missing key. These were the irregularities, the skipped beats that promised to reveal the truth. The garden's roses, heavy with late blooms, swayed in the breeze, their scent mingling with the distant hum of Budapest's streets. Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm, her mind turning over the morning's events. The Kronos jewel, she sensed, was more than a victim of violence. It was a witness, its shattered face concealing a secret someone had killed to protect. As the sun dipped below the Danube's horizon, she felt the weight of time pressing forward, each tick bringing her closer to the heart of the mystery. Chapter 4. The Hidden Compartment. The Hotel Duna's exhibition room, though still sealed by Inspector Nagy's orders, seemed to hold its breath in the late morning light. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight piercing the heavy drapes, illuminating the glass cases where antique clocks stood silent. Their mechanisms paused, as if in mourning for the shattered Kronos jewel. Miss Jane Marple, her slight figure dwarfed by the room's grandeur, stood before the velvet-draped pedestal, her eyes tracing the fractured face of the clock. Her knitting bag rested at her feet, a quiet companion to her thoughts, which ticked with the precision of the mechanisms she studied. The murder of Dr. Emil Kovacs, stabbed with Sir Roland Hargrove's letter opener, had stirred the hotel into a hive of suspicion, and Miss Marple sensed the truth lay not in the loud accusations, but in the small, overlooked details. Inspector Lajos Nagy, his dark eyes wary, had reluctantly allowed Miss Marple to examine the Kronos jewel, swayed by her demure insistence and Lady Beatrice Hargrove's quiet endorsement. "An old lady's interest in clocks," Miss Marple had said with a disarming smile, though her mind was far from idle curiosity. As Nagy's assistant, Officer Szabo, stood watchfully by the door, Miss Marple ran her fingers lightly over the clock's gilded frame, its intricate carvings cool to the touch. The shattered glass face revealed glimpses of the inner workings, cogs and springs frozen in mid-motion, but it was the base that drew her attention. A faint seam, barely discernible, suggested a panel that did not belong to the clock's visible design. With a gentle press, guided by instinct honed in Limewood's quieter mysteries, she felt a click beneath her fingertips. A small compartment sprang open, no larger than a matchbox, hidden within the pedestal's ornate base. Inside lay a dusting of white powder, its faint chemical scent sharp against the room's musty air. Miss Marple stepped back, her expression unchanged, and beckoned Nagy. "Inspector, you might find this of interest," she said softly, gesturing to the compartment. Nagy's brow furrowed as he peered inside, his gloved hand carefully collecting the powder into a vial. "What is this?" he muttered, more to himself than to Miss Marple. She offered no speculation, but her mind recalled a Limewood chemist who had once identified a similar substance in a poisoning case. A sedative, subtle but potent. Perhaps your experts can tell us, she suggested, her tone as mild as her appearance. As Nagy sealed the compartment, Miss Marple's gaze lingered on the clock's broken face. The damage was deliberate, not random, as if someone had struck to obscure rather than destroy. She thought of Kovac's notebook, glimpsed at the crime scene, its pages filled with cryptic diagrams. Had he discovered something about the Kronos jewel, perhaps a flaw in its provenance? The tiny key she had seen yesterday, now in police custody, gnawed at her thoughts. It was too delicate for a door, too specific for a chest. A lock within the clock itself, perhaps. Later, in the hotel's tea room, Miss Marple sat with Beatrice, the clink of porcelain cups a gentle counterpoint to the tension that hung over the guests. The tea room, with its rosewood tables and lace curtains, overlooked the Danube, its waters shimmering under a cloudy sky. Beatrice, her hands fidgeting with a silver teaspoon, confided, "Roland is beside himself, Jane. The Kronos jewel was his pride, but it's brought nothing but grief. He borrowed heavily to acquire it, and now this murder—" Her voice trailed off, her eyes searching Miss Marple's face for reassurance. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her thoughts drifting to the pearl earring she had noticed in the exhibition room. "Debts, Beatrice, can wind a man tighter than any spring," she said, "but it's the secrets behind them that break." She recalled Frederick Langley's loud talk of investments at dinner, his familiarity with Roland suggesting a financial entanglement. Had Kovac's expertise threatened their dealings? Their conversation was interrupted by Clara Varga, who approached with a nervous energy, her dark eyes darting to the tea room's entrance. "Miss Marple," she said, her voice low, "I must speak plainly. Emile was prying into the Kronos jewel's history. He hinted it might not be genuine, and Roland was furious. I didn't kill Emile, but someone did to keep him quiet." Her fingers twisted a silk scarf, its green hue vivid against her pale hands. Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her mind was alert. "Truth, my dear, is like a clock's chime. It rings clear, but only at the right moment." Clara's revelation confirmed her suspicions about Kovac's role, but her urgency felt rehearsed, like a performance in Limewood's amateur dramatics. Was Clara deflecting suspicion, or genuinely afraid? As evening fell, Miss Marple strolled through the hotel's corridors, her steps slow but purposeful. The walls, adorned with portraits of Austro-Hungarian nobility, seemed to watch her progress. Passing the library, she overheard a heated exchange between Langley and Roland behind a half-closed door. "You swore it was a sure thing!" Langley's voice boomed, laced with anger. "Now Kovac is dead and we're exposed!" Roland's reply was a low murmur, but the word patience reached Miss Marple's ears. She moved on, her expression unchanged, but the fragment of conversation clicked into place like a gear in her mind. In her room, Miss Marple sat by a small writing desk, her knitting idle for once. She thought of the white powder, the hidden compartment, the shattered clock face. The sedative suggested premeditation. Had Kovac been drugged to ensure his silence before the fatal blow? The pearl earring, the scratch on the floor, the missing key, all were pieces of a puzzle, like the scattered parts of a Limewood jigsaw she had once helped a child reassemble. But here the stakes were far higher. As she gazed out at Budapest's twinkling lights, Miss Marple felt the weight of the mystery pressing closer. The Kronos jewel was no mere artifact. It was a fulcrum, balancing motives of greed, pride, and fear. Someone in the Hotel Duna had wound the spring too tightly, and Kovac's death was the first break. She sensed another would follow if the truth remained hidden. With a quiet resolve, she resumed her knitting, the soft click of her needles echoing the steady tick of her thoughts, each stitch bringing her closer to the heart of the crime. Chapter 5. The Second Strike. The Hotel Duna awoke to a dawn cloaked in mist, the Danube's waters veiled as if guarding the secrets of the city beyond. Inside, the air was heavy with unease, the murder of Dr. Emil Kovac lingering like a shadow over the marble corridors. Miss Jane Marple, seated in her room with a cup of Earl Grey, gazed out at the fog-shrouded spires of Budapest, her knitting needles idle in her lap. The discovery of the hidden compartment in the Kronos jewel, with its trace of sedative powder, had set her mind ticking faster than the hotel's many clocks. She sensed the mechanism of this mystery was winding tighter, and a second calamity was imminent. Her premonition proved true before breakfast. A piercing cry echoed from the exhibition room, followed by the hurried tread of staff. Miss Marple, wrapping her shawl about her shoulders, followed Lady Beatrice Hargrove down the grand staircase, her steps measured but swift. They arrived to find a grim tableau. Mr. Frederick Langley lay slumped over a small table in the exhibition room. His florid face now a ghastly grey, a crystal tumbler of brandy overturned beside him. The air carried the sharp, medicinal scent of the same sedative Miss Marple had noted in the Kronos jewels compartment. Inspector Lajos Nagy, already on the scene, stood over the body, his expression a blend of frustration and resolve. "Poison," Nagy declared, his voice taut as he examined the tumbler. "The same substance as in the clock, I'd wager." His assistant, Officer Sabo, cordoned off the area, while the remaining guests, Sir Roland Hargrove, Clara Varga, and Madame Elise Dubois, gathered at the room's edge, their faces a study in shock and suspicion. Roland's hands trembled as he clutched a handkerchief, his eyes avoiding the body. Clara's lips parted in a silent gasp, her fingers twisting her green scarf. Madame Dubois, her dove-grey dress immaculate, stood with a stillness that seemed almost defiant, her gaze fixed on the shattered Kronos jewel across the room. Miss Marple, unobtrusive in a corner, observed the scene with her usual clarity. The exhibition room, its clocks now silent under police orders, felt like a stage where the players had forgotten their lines. Langley's death was no random act. It was a deliberate strike, as precise as the blow that had shattered the clock's face. She noted the tumbler's position, its contents spilled across a lace doily, and a faint smudge of red wax on the table's edge, like a drop of sealing wax from a letter. It recalled the wax she had seen near the Kronos jewel after Kovac's murder. A coincidence? Miss Marple thought not. Inspector Nagy, his patience fraying, questioned the guests. "Who saw Mr. Langley last night?" he demanded. Roland admitted to a brief meeting in the library, discussing business matters, but claimed they parted amicably around 10. Clara said she had retired early, overwhelmed by the day's events. Madame Dubois, her voice smooth as silk, reported seeing Langley in the hotel bar, alone, nursing a drink. "He seemed agitated," she added, her eyes meeting Nagy's without flinching. The barman, Peter, confirmed her account, but noted Langley had left abruptly, muttering about a double cross. Miss Marple, permitted to linger by Nagy's grudging indulgence, approached the table where Langley's body had been removed. The red wax smudge was unmistakable, its hue matching the sealing wax she had seen in Madame Dubois' suite during her visit with Beatrice. She recalled Dubois' claim of writing letters, her pristine gloves, her calm amid chaos. The wax suggested presence, perhaps intent. But why poison Langley? Had he known too much about the Kronos jewel, or about Kovac's killer? Over luncheon in the hotel's dining room, Miss Marple sat with Beatrice, whose usual composure was unravelling. 2 murders, Jane, she whispered, her fork idle beside an untouched plate of goulash. Roland is ruined. The exhibition is cursed, and the investors are circling like vultures. Miss Marple patted her hand, her eyes drifting to Clara, who sat alone, staring at her coffee as if it held answers. Curses, Beatrice, are often just human failings dressed in superstition, she said, but vultures, as you say, are drawn to weakness. That afternoon, Miss Marple sought out Madame Dubois in the hotel's conservatory, where the widow was arranging roses in a crystal vase. "A tragic day, madame," Miss Marple began, her tone gentle. Dubois nodded, her movements precise. "Indeed, Miss Marple, Mr. Langley was indelicate, but his death is shocking." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled faintly. "You mentioned he was agitated last night. Did he speak of the Kronos jewel?" Dubois' hand paused, a petal falling. "He spoke of debts, nothing more," she said, her voice cool. Miss Marple noted the petal, its fall like a clue dropped carelessly. Returning to her room, Miss Marple reflected on Limewood, where a stolen necklace had been traced by a single thread caught in a rosebush. Here, the red wax was her thread, linking Dubois to both crime scenes. Langley's death suggested he had uncovered something, perhaps Kovac's suspicions about the clock's authenticity, or a financial scheme tied to Roland's debts. The sedative, used twice, pointed to a calculated mind, one that planned beyond the heat of passion. As evening settled over Budapest, Miss Marple stood by her window, the city's lights piercing the mist like stars. The Kronos jewel, she mused, was the axis of this tragedy, its hidden compartment a Pandora's box of motives. Langley's bluster, Kovac's expertise, Dubois' composure, all were gears in a machine driven by greed or fear. The red wax, the pearl earring, the tiny key, these were the irregularities that would unwind the truth. She resumed her knitting, the soft click of her needles a quiet promise that the mechanism of murder, however intricate, would not outrun her. Chapter 6. The unwinding of the truth. The library of the Hotel Duna was a haven of hushed elegance, its oak shelves and leather-bound tomes bathed in the soft glow of lamplight as evening settled over Budapest. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked with a solemn cadence, a reminder that time, however disrupted by murder, marched on. Miss Jane Marple sat in a high-backed chair, her knitting folded neatly in her lap, her eyes bright behind her spectacles. The room was filled with the remaining guests: Sir Roland Hargrove, Clara Varga, and Madame Elise Dubois, along with Lady Beatrice Hargrove and Inspector Lajos Nagy, who had agreed to Miss Marple's request for a gathering to discuss the murders of Dr. Emil Kovac and Mr. Frederick Langley. The air was thick with anticipation, like the moment before a clock's chime. Miss Marple began, her voice soft but clear, carrying the weight of certainty. "The Kronos jewel," she said, "is not merely a clock but the heart of this tragedy. Its shattering was no act of vandalism. It was a calculated move to conceal a truth." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room, noting Roland's clenched hands, Clara's wide eyes, and Dubois' serene composure. Dr. Kovac and Mr. Langley died because they threatened to expose that truth. But the clues, Small, like the gears of a clock, point to the killer. Inspector Nagy, standing by the fireplace, raised an eyebrow, but nodded for her to continue. Miss Marple's fingers brushed her knitting bag, where she had tucked a small envelope containing her findings. "Let us begin with Dr. Kovacs," she said. "He was a horologist, meticulous and curious." His notebook, glimpsed at the crime scene, contained diagrams of the Kronos jewel, suggesting he doubted its authenticity. A forged clock would ruin Sir Roland's reputation and finances, for he had borrowed heavily to acquire it. Roland shifted uncomfortably, his cufflink glinting. Miss Marple continued. Mr. Langley, an investor, was entangled in Roland's venture. His anger in the library, overheard 2 nights ago, revealed his fear of financial loss. "We're exposed," he said. "But why kill Kovacs?" Because Kovacs' expertise threatened to unravel the deception. She turned to the clues. The Kronos jewel's hidden compartment contained a sedative, used to drug Kovacs before he was stabbed with Roland's letter opener. The shattered face obscured the clock's flaws. Marks of modern craftsmanship, perhaps. The tiny key I saw now in your possession, Inspector, likely unlocked that compartment. But another clue, the red wax smudge near the clock, and later by Langley's body, points to a specific hand. Clara gasped, her scarf slipping from her fingers. Madame Dubois' expression remained impassive, but her gloved hands tightened. Miss Marple pressed on. The pearl earring, found in the exhibition room, suggested someone's presence during Kovacs' murder. The scratch on the floor hinted at a struggle or a moved object, but the red wax, matching the sealing wax in Madame Dubois' suite, was the thread that tied the crimes together. She faced Dubois directly, her tone gentle but unyielding. "Madame Dubois, you claim to be writing letters, but you were in the exhibition room when Kovacs died. The wax smudge betrays you, as does the earring, which matches the pair you wore at dinner. You knew Kovacs from years past, didn't you? A horologist who once exposed your own dealings in forged antiques, ruining your reputation in Paris." Dubois' lips parted, but Miss Marple continued. "You came to Budapest not for clocks, but for revenge. Kovacs' suspicions about the Kronos jewel threatened to resurface your past. You drugged him with the sedative, hidden in the clock's compartment, and stabbed him with Roland's letter opener to cast suspicion on him." The shattered face was a distraction, meant to suggest vandalism. But Langley, privy to Roland's financial troubles, grew suspicious. He confronted you in the bar, hinting at a double cross. So you poisoned his brandy with the same sedative, ensuring his silence. Nagy stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "You have proof, Miss Marple." She produced the envelope, revealing a scrap of paper from her knitting bag. This note, found near the Kronos jewel, reads, "Meet me at midnight," in Madame Dubois' handwriting. It lured Kovacs to his death. The wax, the earring, the sedative, all point to her. Dubois laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "An old lady's fancies. You weave a tale, but where is the evidence?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "The police chemist confirmed the sedative's match, madame, and the key, which Inspector Nagy holds, unlocks the compartment where you hid the poison. Your gloves, so pristine, concealed the wax on your fingers, but the smudge betrayed you." Dubois' composure cracked, her face paling. "You meddling fool!" she spat, rising. "Kovacs ruined me once, and I'd not let him do it again. Langley was a greedy fool who'd have blackmailed me." Her confession spilled like a spring unwound, and Nagi signalled Sabot to restrain her. As Dubois was led away, her elegance reduced to defiance, the room fell silent. Roland, his voice hoarse, thanked Miss Marple. "I was a fool, Miss Marple. The clock was a forgery, and I feared ruin." Clara, tears streaming, vowed to restore the Hargrove name. Beatrice clasped Miss Marple's hand, her relief palpable. "You've saved us, Jane." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "People, Beatrice, are like clocks, complex but predictable once you see the pattern." The grandfather clock chimed, its notes clear and final, as if marking the end of the mystery. The next morning, Miss Marple boarded a train back to Limewood, her knitting bag at her side. Budapest's spires faded into the mist, but the memory of its clocks lingered. She thought of a Limewood widow whose lies had unravelled over a misplaced hairpin, much like Dubois' wax. The train's rhythm matched her thoughts, each click a reminder that truth, like time, could not be stopped. As she opened her knitting, she felt the quiet satisfaction of a puzzle solved, her mind already turning to the small mysteries of home, where human nature, in all its intricacy, awaited her.